to infinity and beyond.
This is me. This is how I win.
Were you rushing or were you dragging? Answer!
You're a wizard, Harry.
Say what again? Say what again? I dare you.
No, I am your father.
Hasta la vista, baby.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
And here we go.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back inside the film room. Zach Goins here with Jake Lawler.
Hello.
Are we going to do this entire episode in like spoken word freestyle?
Yeah, we should sing through the whole thing.
That would be very impressive, because today we are talking about Hamilton, the hit Broadway musical, Lin-Manuel Miranda's masterpiece that finally dropped on Disney Plus. Give us a little something to watch while we're all still at home. So we've got some news, got that review to get into. But first off, as always, Jake, how you been? Let's catch up a little bit.
Oh, I'm doing all right. Just keep pushing. I think I'm 99% sure I'm moving out to LA at the end of the month.
I saw Andy Lawler's post looking for some roomies.
Yeah, there's a few people I can stay with first, but that's more to when I actually get settled in. That'd be good to get started. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
What's the plan? You said end of July. Are you doing like a cross-country road trip to get out there?
Yeah, we're gonna have to bring my car out because it's LA, so that's gonna be an experience in its own right.
Yeah, that'll be fun though. Like, I don't know if you can really like stop at places and do things with the current pandemic, but at least like maybe see some stuff while you're driving.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And speaking of driving,
Oh,
where did you go?
I went to the drive-in movie theater. I threw it back a couple decades, and it was part of the Michael B. Jordan. I think we talked about it last week, but like the Michael B. Jordan and Amazon Studios collection that they're doing, like a curated collection of movies throughout the summer that MBJ has selected to honor Black voices, people of color in general in cinema. So it was the first week last Wednesday. Saw Love and Basketball, and it was supposed to be a doubleheader with Love and Basketball and Crazy Rich Asians. And I guess it was, but I left after the first one because summer in North Carolina, it didn't get dark until like 9:30. So the movie didn't start until then, and it was an hour away in Albemarle. So it was like the second movie wasn't starting until 11:30. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and clock out. Not going to get home at 3 a.m. after watching a movie I've seen already. So, but it was fun. It was a good time. They've got a good slate the rest of the summer. There's Black Panther and Creed are next. And then I think later on we've got Hook, Into the Spider-Verse, Get Out, Do the Right Thing, Girls Trip, and Coming to America. So some pretty quality movies for people who want to go check that out.
Yeah, very nice. It sounds like an interesting slate. I might have to take a trip to Albemarle
before you head out west. But I will advise you bring lots of water and probably a fan, because I was not going to waste all my gas with my AC on. So I was sweating out there. It was toasty.
I believe that. And then you also watched something else?
Yeah, I did. I watched First Cow, the upcoming A24 flick. I guess it came out right at the beginning of coronavirus, basically, and then had like an abbreviated stint, and now they're releasing it on VOD on Friday. And that made me sad, because as everyone is, I love A24, but I just wasn't really vibing with this one. It was a little too slow for me, a little too meandering of just like a not much really happening storyline, but it's gotten like great reviews from everybody else. So obviously something's just not clicking with me. So I would still recommend people seeing that, because don't take just my advice if everybody else is giving it 4 and 5 stars.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard brilliant stuff, but movies are subjective, as we know and as we've talked about. So
it's a very like simplistic film of just like living, like it happens over like a 1 or 2 day, like I don't know, it happens like just like on a daily basis of like just what they're doing in their lives in like the 1800s or so, whenever time period, like that kind of period piece timeline. So I don't know, wasn't my cup of tea, but that's not to say it won't be yours. So I would definitely suggest that, especially to help out A24 with some home box office success coming Friday.
yeah, absolutely. It's been on my watch list for a while, since I've kind of heard rumblings about it, and then after the abbreviated release, and it's always been something I wanted to check out. So I think I will be doing it when it does come out. So
I will say it's probably for the best that it's going to VOD versus trying to wait and do a theatrical release, because it's not like, even if it is like getting the rave reviews that it is, I don't think it would be like a packing the theater type movie to really like sell lots of tickets. So I think that honestly more people would probably end up seeing it this way than in a theater, especially in a post-coronavirus theater. So check it out.
check it out.
Let's check out some news. Unless there's any other life updates from you from this past week.
No, I think news is good. Seth Rogen is going to be a pickle.
Wow, that's a sentence right there. That's pretty. For those of you who don't follow, first trailer came out for An American Pickle, Seth Rogen's new film, his HBO Max original. And this is the most random movie ever, but it looks absolutely delightful. It looks so dumb, but so awesome. So the premise here is that it's like back in, I don't even know what the time period is. I think like 1800s or like late 1800s, early 1900s. That this relative of Seth Rogen, or of the character, he is played by Seth Rogen. He falls into a vat of pickle juice, and the brine sustains him, keeps him alive in perfect condition for 100 years, and then he reawakens. And so he's been transplanted from I guess probably 1920 to 2020, and he connects with his younger relative, who is also played by Seth Rogen, and it just looks hysterical.
Yeah, and it's based on the 2013 short story Sellout by Simon Rich, who also co-wrote An American Pickle with Seth Rogen. And yeah, I mean, the trailer looked great. I mean, I think you're right. It is a very random and very out there film, but I think it's one that we need. Original content is something that is always something that I enjoy looking at, something I enjoy following, and it seems about kind of the zany otherworldliness of what we're seeing on screen, and kind of the entire plot is interesting, and it's exciting to see something different and unique, and especially brought to life by someone as charismatic and successful as Seth Rogen.
And I think he's just, sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no, yeah. I mean, I think it's just going to be something. And it is scheduled to be released on August 6th with HBO Max, if you have the incredibly great streaming service.
Yeah, 100% echo that. But I just think, I was going to say, I think Seth Rogen just like has the look for that time period.
Oh,
like,
yeah, absolutely.
And if you go to the IMDb page and pull up the movie, the photo is just like, it looks like a real life, like black and white, old timey picture, because he's got his big beard and the cap, and just he fits it perfectly. So I'm interested to see him kind of channel this. Did you watch the Netflix show Living with Yourself? It was the one where Paul Rudd played like the himself and then like the clone of himself.
No, I haven't.
But basically just acting across from himself. I'm interested to see how that goes. He's Lindsay Lohaning it from The Parent Trap. Like, it's proven to be successful if you have the right person doing it, and I think that Seth Rogen can probably pull that off.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and then speaking of Seth Rogen, we're going to do a little connection. Seth Rogen and Charlize Theron were together in Long Shot.
There you
And
go.
now,
There you go. It's like we're playing the movie game.
yeah. And now they've gone their separate ways with Seth Rogen, American Pickle, and Charlize Theron with The Old Guard. And the first reviews are in for The Old Guard, her new Netflix action movie. Currently, it holds a 69% on Rotten Tomatoes, and with IndieWire hailing it as Netflix's best action movie of 2020 up to this point.
Which is interesting considering Extraction was pretty, as far as action goes, that part was of that movie was really impressive, really good. And then
Absolutely.
even To Five Bloods, which is obviously much more than an action movie, but that had some pretty good action sequences as well. So I thought this one, just from the look of it, when it was first announced, I thought it was going to be somewhat of just like just a Netflix movie, like one that you'd turn on and check out. But it seems to be pretty good. Love Charlize Theron, so I'm definitely excited to check it out. It comes out this Friday, and I think we might be, depending on scheduling and what we can see, might be doing a little doubleheader next week, reviewing The Old Guard and Palm Springs, the new Andy Samberg, Kristen Milioti Hulu movie. So it's good to see that there's a lot of good stuff, or potentially good stuff, coming out direct to streaming here, with just talking about American Pickle, this one on Netflix, then a new one on Hulu. I mean, there's finally like a good amount to pick from, I feel like.
Oh, absolutely. And speaking of The Old Guard, Gina Prince Blythewood, the director of The Old Guard, directed Love and Basketball, which you saw.
Right. I noticed that. And I was trying to think after I figured that out. I was like, I don't think there's going to be many connections between the style of like how she directs a rom-com like drama versus this like super action-packed mercenary movie. So it's nice to show that she has range in her catalog.
Yeah, absolutely. And then after all of the
Speaking of range in the catalog.
Yeah, we thought that the pickle was going to be the most random. The American Pickle was going to be the most random thing that we heard this week, but no.
Jason Momoa, Mr. Aquaman, Khal Drogo, big tough guy, is in talks to voice Frosty the Snowman in Warner Brothers live action CG hybrid movie. Okay. Whatever
well,
you say.
He showed his range in that Super Bowl commercial when he took
right. When we find out he's actually a scrawny little bald guy.
Yeah, so he'll be bringing that role back for this one. I'm confused about.
I mean, I would. Okay, at first glance, first thought, it seems super random, but then I thought about it a little bit more, and to me, I think that at least just like seeing Momoa in interviews and on social media and stuff, that he seems to have like a similar vibe to The Rock when it comes to like the like Ohana kind of like family, like really like warm-hearted guy, even though he's like this big intimidating guy. So from that angle, I can see this as like, I mean, I still don't really see it as like a great match, but I can see the reasoning behind it. Like, it's not, Jason Momoa seems to be like a big teddy bear cuddly kind of guy, like on the inside. Obviously his characters are not necessarily that way, but it's not as far-fetched as we might think.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, he does have the range. I mean, because speaking of Khal Drogo, and then his very different performance in Aquaman, just in terms
My
of
man
the character. Yeah, exactly. So I mean, he can do different things, and I think that the Rock comparison is similar and hopefully a well-earned one. But we have Jeff Johns producing it, written by David Barron, who collaborated on Elf. So I love Elf.
They've got that Christmas movie. They've got good Christmas movie roots there.
Yeah, no, I mean, Elf is a Christmas classic, and Jeff Johns followed me on Twitter, so I support that. So
I can't believe he didn't give you the inside scoop. He didn't let us break the story.
Yeah, I know, man. That's just wild. That's disrespectful, honestly, but it's okay. We've been following each other for 3 years now, and still doesn't want to say what's up, but it's cool.
One day. Once you make that move out to LA, it'll all turn around. Final piece of news, also a pretty, not, I wouldn't say random, but just like, we'll talk about it. Zachary Levi to star as NFL Hall of Famer Kurt Warner in the Kurt Warner biopic American Underdog. And I don't know how familiar you are with Kurt Warner's story, but I mean, it's a pretty compelling story, like a rags to riches kind of story. He was working the graveyard shift at a supermarket, stocking the shelves as a 28-year-old after playing college ball and a little arena football, and then ended up getting a late shot at the NFL at 28 in his second season, led them to the Super Bowl and won MVP. So I mean, and then obviously went on to have like a lengthy career in the NFL with lots of success. So I just think that this is it sounds like a weird movie to me though. Like it seems like it's going to be one of those like a breakthrough, or I still believe, like kind of like the like Christian movies, you know?
Yeah.
It seems like it'll be like in that vein of stuff. And I'm pretty sure that one of the, I still believe the Christian musician one that just came out this past year, I think that writer is signed on for this, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I mean, and I feel like we've kind of moved out of that early, because we had the early 2000s era where there were like the football biopics with Remember the Titans and Invincible and Friday Night Lights and things like that. So,
and there was just Brian Banks last year, which I did not see, but that seemed of the same genre of like just out of place with the 2019-2020 like movie landscape. For
sure. But Zachary Levi's a big star now because of Shazam. He's brilliant in that. So it's definitely, I think that is probably that's the most exciting news coming out of the development of this. So hopefully there will be more to come as it continues to develop.
Yeah, and also hopefully it's like it does football scenes well, because as I think we've discussed, there's just never really been very well executed and realistic football scenes in television or movies, you know, where we all saw the clip a couple of months ago of the All-American show on Netflix where like the dude's running a curl and he catches it and just looks super awkward and unnatural. So if they're dealing with NFL caliber players, I think that they should be able to hopefully make that work so it's not cringy.
Yeah, I definitely agree there.
Well, that is it for news. It's time to get down to the main event. What we were all waiting for months and years if you're Jake, or days if you're me. We are breaking down Hamilton on Disney+. Let's do it.
The $10 founding father without a father got a lot farther by working a lot harder, by being a lot smarter, by being a self-starter.
To your union and the hope that you provide. May you always be satisfied.
This is Hamilton.
So, obviously, the critical commercial Broadway success, the mega superstar Lin-Manuel Miranda, this performance earned 16 Tony nominations, which is the most all-time for a single show. It's Lin-Manuel Miranda's hip-hop rap retelling of the American Revolution through the eyes of Alexander Hamilton. We touched on it briefly last week, but just before we get started, Jake, your relationship with this is different than mine. You've been a song listener, a soundtrack listener for quite some time. Like what was the hype, the anticipation coming into this as someone who has really immersed themselves in the story and stuff beforehand?
Yeah, well, so my dad teaches at Northwest School of the Arts in Charlotte. And he's on the administrative staff there, and it being an art school, he's surrounded by kids and faculty alike that are enamored with the arts. I mean, he is as well. He loves film, but Broadway has always been his first love. And he's seen, like, he's seen, and he could name too many shows to count. I mean, I honestly, like, I was never really big into Broadway because it's very hard to access if you're not like able to go to a theater, or if you're not in New York, which we'll talk a little bit more about the accessibility of Hamilton now. But when this came out, or when the rumblings of this was about in 2016, my dad really found it, discovered it, and then he, of course, fell in love with it. And he kind of indoctrinated my brother as well. And they had been listeners for a while. They actually saw the show in Charlotte a few years ago, but they had been listeners for quite some time. And I was never really dismissive of it, as it was just one of those things where, like, you got to watch Hamilton, and you tell your friend, yeah, I'll get to it, and you never did. And then I would say like mid 2019 is when I really just sat down and listened to it I just listened to the whole soundtrack because I was driving back from Chapel Hill to Charlotte. And that's where, like, the lightning bolt come on, or like the lightning bolt came on and it struck. And then I apologized to my dad and brother for it being so long for me to take it. And then since then, I've been a fan ever since. I really don't know a lot of Broadway plays. I haven't seen a lot of Broadway plays. I haven't seen a lot of musicals, but of the ones that I've seen, of the ones that I've heard, this is by far my favorite for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah, I think we'll get into some of the specifics of it, but I think part of that is just like the uniqueness of it, that it's not like traditional show tunes, that it's blending genres and stuff. But for me, like, my experience, like I said, I had never, with the exception of the very first song, I have never like listened through the soundtrack or really done much research into anything regarding the show and the production stuff. But that's not because I don't like musicals. Like, I am actually a big fan of Broadway and shows and musicals and stuff because my brother all throughout high school and college did musicals and was like the lead. So I had to go see all of those. And then we went as families to go see stuff like occasionally that came to Charlotte as like a Christmas present or something. And then Rebecca, my girlfriend, was the same way, like through basically her entire high school career and a little bit in college, performing and stuff. So like I've seen a good amount of shows from like community level to some like traveling. And then I've seen I saw one on Broadway and then one in London. But for the most part, like, I traditionally just listen to stuff. I listen to show tunes if I've seen the show, because I'm not one of those people who just like can listen to it without knowing what's going on. If that makes sense. Like, I like to know why they're singing, what the story is, instead of just listening to it. So like after I saw Waitress on Broadway, I love that soundtrack. I listen to it regularly now, but I never really got into Hamilton because I didn't know, especially the way that they sing and rap in this, that like it's fast and it's telling the entire story. So like, just to kind of get in from the outside looking in, I didn't want to immerse myself in that. But now that I've seen it, this is like my playlist going forward for the next 3 months, while you guys have already known about it.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the experience, because I've I think kind of different from you. Like I said before, I haven't seen a lot of Broadway plays, but I really like Broadway music, and I like the music that you can kind of get via some streaming app, or like whether it be Spotify or Apple Music or just something like that. And growing up in my household, it was customary to at least hear some sort of musical going on in the background. So I've heard a lot. And then when I heard this, and of course, everyone's like general experience with musicals or like the Disney stuff, or just, things like The Greatest Showman, which wasn't like an actual Broadway piece, but just brought to life through the screen. But yeah, I mean, everything that I've seen pales in comparison to like the brilliance and excellence that is Hamilton, and especially being able to see it finally after listening to it for all this time was, a special and enthralling experience.
Yeah, I'm very excited to now be a part of like the phenomenon and being able to have that access. And I think that does a lot, like you were talking about earlier, the the gatekeeping of Broadway and musicals and stuff by people who have money. Like obviously, like I've been lucky enough to check out one show on Broadway and see other stuff that has traveled, but like there's a lot of people that are not able to make a trip to New York or see a show or anything like that. Like unless you're living in New York and wealthy enough to spend money consistently on shows. So to be able to have a production like this that is so true to, obviously it would be better in person, but like this is the next best thing. To be able to have that access and to see that and share it with everyone, I think that's incredible.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's so special. My brother bought the like Hamilton behind the scenes book that they made specifically for the show after it came out. And it's kind of fascinating to hear about the process of it coming together and, you know, really how Lin-Manuel Miranda discovered Alexander Hamilton, the book by Ron Chernow, which is ultimately what the musical is largely based off of. And it's a fascinating experience to kind of hear about the different things that helped create something so like utterly and staggeringly brilliant. I've always, you know, as a writer, I've always thought that songwriting and creating songs is like the most elusive and far-fetched thing that I can ever, because whereas I write, you know, stories that have nothing to do with music, I think music is such a difficult thing to understand and to make it in such a way that it allows you to make it enjoyable. It allows people to enjoy it, allows people to understand your vision. And, you know, I think that the brilliance of Hamilton or at least one of the many brilliances of Hamilton lies in the ability to craft such a wide epic in a way that's engaging and kind of stays true to the source material that it's based upon.
Right. Like I'm not by any means like a history buff. That was always probably my least favorite subject in school, but this was like incredibly compelling. The way that they're able to tell the story and put it in a way that even people like me and people that are probably less enthralled with history than I am are still able to just be like on the edge of their seat with it. Like I think that's awesome.
Yeah. And, you know, the famous kind of introduction that everyone had to this prior to the show coming out was when Lin-Manuel Miranda was invited to perform the In the Heights music, his earlier musical at the White House. And instead of doing the music from In the Heights, he created his little project, then was called the Hamilton mixtape. And he performed the first song of what would be the first song of the show. And, you know, in that reading, you can see that people are kind of laughing and they don't necessarily know what exactly he's doing because he was expected to do something else. But then very quickly, you know, people become enthralled and engaged in what's happening. And I think that sort of allowed him to become more confident and gave people, you know, at least gave him the kind of the necessary confirmation needed to move forward.
So before we get into like the specifics of the music and the plot and everything about that, I just want to talk about, because we are a movie podcast, like let's talk a little bit about the like technical side of things, like how they were able to take a live stage production and like so effectively put it on film in a way that's accessible. Because I mean, I've seen from like high school productions, like obviously a much different scale than Broadway and Disney and something like this, but like that's just like where they stick a camera at the back of the auditorium and it's like one angle. But like the angles with everything here, the zoom, like I don't know if it was like dollies or wires or what, but like to be able to, because you're getting these close-ups on people's faces, but at the same time it's not like there's a camera guy standing on the stage like going around, you know, from every angle you never see another camera or another shot. I just thought that was the ability to really put you there. And it starts at the very beginning with like the crowd, hearing like the crowd noise and everything. It's like I said, it's obviously better in person, I would imagine, but this is the second best thing.
Yeah, I mean, the editing is very sharp in this. They did a tremendous job, and I think that they were able to do such a good job because I'm almost certain that the intention was to put this on a screen at some point. When it got 16 nominations at the Tonys and won 11 of them, and in 13 different categories, making it, arguably the most successful musical of all time, and especially the timeliness of the topic, and especially the type of music that they use, because it largely is rap, which is a genre that has now dominated, the global cultural scene for the past few years, that I'm sure every intention was made to put this on, to make what we watched on Disney Plus. And, I think that because they went in with that intention to film Hamilton, to document it in such a way that it can be, like you said, the second best thing, made it all the more engaging, just because they knew from the jump that this is exactly what they wanted to do with it moving forward.
And there was a lot of impressive stuff, like just small things that obviously you wouldn't get in an in-person viewing of it. Like when they do a lot of cuts along with the music, like a ba like in a song, they cut to 3 different angles. The ability to put the focus on where the camera is versus if you're sitting in the upper deck in the far corner, like you can't really see the intricacies of things so well. So I think that's just another advantage of giving people access to it through a method like this as well.
Yeah, and one other thing, I think the close-ups were brilliant. I mean, seeing the close-up of Philippa Sue and Byrne, or Leslie Odom Jr. in the room where it happened, or Jonathan Groff, who is just
when he slobbers.
He's just so stopping and electric. And like you said, that's something that you would not get to see otherwise. And you also got to see their talent as actors with the different camera angles and with the close-ups, because you can see their facial expressions and how they carry themselves as they move through the show.
Right. Like there's one moment where I think it's early on, maybe even in the opening scene, but when Lin-Manuel Miranda comes forward and it's a close-up on his face, and you really see the emotion that you wouldn't see 10 rows deep in the audience, because like you're so close, you see like how his eyes dart around, like it shows like that uncertainty, like he's kind of taken in the scene, looking around, doesn't know what to think of what's going on. Whereas in a live performance, you might miss that and just kind of see him from afar.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of that just goes into making the experience that it was, and having a 2-hour and 40-minute runtime. It really flew by. I mean, it was similar to, because we talked about Da 5 Bloods earlier this year, a few weeks back, about how well it was paced, and this is a near 3-hour experience, and to be able to really zoom through it and not even feel the drag of time is an accomplishment all in its own.
Shall we get down into a little bit more specific stuff? I mean, I have some notes that I wrote down as I was watching as a first-time listener and viewer, but some more plot stuff, some more music stuff, instead of just talking about the production itself. So, I mean, like I said earlier, straight from the start, I got chills. Like I knew I was about to watch something something like special, because like the crowd, hearing how excited they were, and then they hit you with that opening number. I was just like, wow, like this is the only song that I knew going into it, and I'm already like blown away. Like, I don't know if it has that same effect for you, someone who's like more familiar with it, but I was just like swept off my feet from the get-go.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you've been listening to it for years, and you've listened to the song so much that you can recite basically all of them from memory, that you expect that there's a certain amount of familiarity that you have with the material, and in a sense there is. But when you actually watch it, when you see what they're doing, what the words actually mean in context, how it's being choreographed, how everything is working in and out together, it exceeded every single expectation that I had of it. And with something like Hamilton, that is just it's mythological at this point. And it's up there with one of those things, and to have a reputation like that, and then to exceed that reputation, is just it's a very special thing, and to be able to watch it on Disney Plus and watch it in the way that it was intended to watch is just brilliant. And yeah, I mean, the opening number is fantastic, and there were songs that I would skip, like all the Jonathan Groff stuff. I would just skip on the soundtrack because he had a great voice, but like it's not necessarily what you wanted to listen to on a car ride.
Right.
And then when you watch him, like I honestly thought that he was one of my highlights of the show, and coming into it, I really thought nothing of it. But to be able to watch him just be so charismatic and so engaged, and his voice is just tremendous.
Right.
It's one of those things that just, really blows you away, even if you know about the stuff.
I wrote down that, like, I think that Jonathan, with the exception, obviously Lin-Manuel Miranda is the star, but Jonathan Groff and Daveed Diggs were definitely my two favorite characters. They were clearly the two, everybody was enjoying themselves, but like those two were just like living it up, like having so much fun out there, and you could tell. And I mean, partly that's due to how their characters are, especially for Jonathan Groff as King George. But I mean, it's just like impossible not to smile while they're out there. And I mean, I wrote down that I thought Jonathan Groff's, the first time when he came out, I guess it might be the second time he came out, but when he sings "You'll Be Back," I thought I wrote down that was the best one, just because of like his range there, like the way that he goes from like da 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 da, and like that's gonna be a big audio boom on the recording, but just like the way he just like belts it out in like 2 seconds, it's super impressive. But then that's something that I found myself doing, is like that song then got surpassed by another one and another one, that I kept going, okay, now this is the best song. No. Now this one right here, this is definitely the best one. It's like each song is like outdone by the one that follows it. And I think I definitely have to spend a couple weeks like listening through it all to really determine what I think is my favorite or the best musical number.
Yeah. And, and speaking of, just kind of like to two-part counter what you said, not necessarily counter, but just kind of to go off of what you said. I watched Blind Spotting to prepare for this, just because I'm such a huge fan of Daveed Diggs, and I hadn't seen it since we saw it in theaters before we played Cal, and it was more phenomenal than I remember, and he's brilliant in it. So I was very excited going into this, and then to watch his performance, because I've been around the soundtrack for quite some time now, so I know when he's Lafayette, and I know when he's Thomas Jefferson, just from a musical standpoint. But to watch, like, he's completely different in the second act playing Thomas Jefferson than he is playing Lafayette, and he is just having a complete ball.
The first song is Thomas Jefferson. What Did I Miss?
Yeah,
he just comes out swinging.
Yeah, and it's funny because with Hamilton, nearly every song would be the best song in any other show, barring maybe a few of the great ones. And the fact that, like you said, every single one, because coming in, my favorite was Satisfied and Nonstop. Those are my two big ones. Renee Elise Goldsberry, who I just watched or rewatched recently in Waves, is just a phenomenal talent all around, and her being able to kind of carry Satisfied throughout the whole number is just brilliant. And the choreography to do everything in reverse is just so fascinating. And then Nonstop, of course, was my favorite for a long time. But the one that really surprised me was The Room Where It Happened. Just because of Leslie Odom's show-stopping performance, so much so that I had a few locks in my head, and The Room Where It Happened was something that I routinely did not listen to, and now like I'll have to keep listening to it more and more because of how engaged and how brilliant it really is watching it unfold on screen.
Yeah, I mean, I think going back to What Did I Miss, like one of the things about this that we touched on briefly is like the diversity of the genres. Like within, obviously, like a majority of this is like hip hop, rap style music, but there's so much, like What Did I Miss is kind of like a bluesy, like upbeat song, and then there's cabinet battles that are like straight up rap battles. Then there's the like Satisfied and Helpless that are more of like the traditional musical theater songs, and then obviously the ones that are more like the Alexander Hamilton and My Shot, those ones that are more of like the rap music. But I think that that's incredible that it's like you can't really like put your finger on the style of this music because it's so all over the place, but it works together so well. Like I think that even for people who might think that they're not like musical people or like don't want to listen to show tunes, like this is not your traditional show tunes. And I mean, I another thing I specifically loved is like all of the super aggressive songs. Like I think a lot of the character intros, like specifically with Right Hand Man when George Washington like comes in and he's like going super hard and the music's like da-na-na-na-na. And I think Lafayette has one as well. And then Hercules. Like, I just think that stuff was so good. And it's like, how am I watching a Broadway show right now? This is not what you would think about. Like, we talked about what Uncut Gems, like what your expectations for Adam Sandler are. It's like the same thing, but with Broadway here.
Absolutely, yeah. And Yorktown was just phenomenal. And I think because as soon as you said Hercules Mulligan, that my thought went to Yorktown when he comes back. When they said that they have a spy on the inside. And then, Yorktown is really, I think it's one of the many, it serves sort of as a microcosm for the whole play because there is this sort of traditional singing in Yorktown. There is this sort of traditional show tune, but then there's like the hard rap. There's the difference in beat switches. There's a difference in tonal shifts. And there are so many songs that really serve as like, fusion, kind of fusion places and genre fusion to make a singular experience, which is Hamilton. And it's just brilliant. And the first act has always been my favorite. And this kind of solidified that, just watching it unfold. But the second act I found much more engaging watching it. Just because I think the second act relies a lot more on context, especially with Alexander Hamilton's infidelity and, how like building a new nation from there on forth. And you appreciate all of that a lot more when you're watching it unfold rather than listening to it.
Right. I mean, I think going back to the story, like you're talking about all the context and stuff and like knowing the story, I think a lot of that, I don't know, it's probably just a combination of like never really focusing on it and also just like not really feeling the desire to, for me, like as far as studying history goes. But there was so much in here that I didn't know, like that. And I think that's the case for a lot of people. Like I left this ready with like 80 entry list of things that I want to go Google and learn. And like, I'm convinced I'm going to go get the book to read now.
And I think to your point about saying that a lot of people didn't know about that, I think that one of the many excellent reasons why Hamilton works so well is because the shift in the second act, when you're talking more and you're learning more about Hamilton, you're learning more about building this new nation, is that with the first act is stuff that people kind of already know. Like we know that there was a war. We know that, that
it's like the surface level stuff.
Yeah. And then the second act comes in and then you begin to like learn a lot more. And one of the reasons why I think it works so well is because we get an entire picture, an entire representation. Because in the first act, Alexander Hamilton is like the superhero. He's the guy that comes in, who everyone turns to for advice, who everyone turns to for help. He's a fundamental reason why the Revolutionary War is won. But then if they wanted to keep him on his Superman track and make a fluff piece about a founding father, they could have kept it there. But then, to address his faults, to address his shortcomings, to address his arrogance, to address his infidelity. I mean, writing a song like Burn and to allow Philippa Sue the opportunity to, speak about Alexander Hamilton's cheating and how it affected her character is something that makes it so much more engaging and so much more exciting to see a representation of a full picture and not just a portion of it.
Right. I totally agree with that. The fact that there was no, like you said, in the first act, he was the guy. But then like in the second act, there was no like clear cut good guy, I guess. Like there's bits and pieces from everyone. And I mean, that's super realistic, that there oftentimes aren't people that are entirely good and entirely bad. Like that there's bits and pieces from each one that this makes sense, that makes sense, but I don't like this, I don't like that. That, I mean, it just makes it all the more realistic. Like I hadn't really thought about what you said, but the fact we could have just made like a puff piece that would have just glorified him. But the choice to actively show the good sides and the bad sides is incredible. And I mean, another thing, it wasn't the first act, but I didn't know about John Lawrence, Anthony Ramos's character, the like trying to free the slave, like just thinking about like what could have been different there, like that he was trying to free slaves as early as like the start of the revolution, and like was advocating against slavery. Like it's crazy that like something as grand as that was never taught to us like in school. I mean, I'm not surprised, but just like knowing now, it's startling.
And when you start to learn more about history, what always comes to mind next, at least for me, is thinking about the what if scenarios. And, you know, it's also like, what if Aaron Burr had won the presidency? What if Alexander Hamilton had more faith in him and sided with him to allow him to win? I mean, Aaron Burr was an abolitionist. He was one of the only, I think he was the only political figure in New York to speak out about slavery and say that this needed to end. Whereas, you know, Thomas Jefferson owned 600 plus slaves in Virginia. So it's interesting to think about what would have happened when you know more about what did happen. And watching this play towards the end, you know, I've always been of the belief, at least ever, like even more so now, that Eliza is really the protagonist of this entire story. Just because, just her journey throughout and how she's affected by Alexander Hamilton's infidelity. And then when their son dies and she has to basically forgive him, and they have to move forward as a family after being fractured like that. And then when Hamilton dies, when Aaron Burr kills him, and she says something along the lines of like her tears are useless, and she kind of gets to work and she creates the legacy that Hamilton deserved and that Hamilton earned. And, you know, it's just one of those things that just makes it a lot more interesting and a lot more, you become a lot more invested in the material when you think about it in senses where you can actually see what's happening.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I mean, I think that it obviously addresses what we're talking about like not knowing these things, with the whole premise of like who lives, who dies, who tells your story, like not having control over that. I mean, obviously with a guy like John Lawrence passing away, like that's why we don't, like, it's like the common phrase, like history is told by the victors. And so it's like, that's something that's just never really been addressed, because nobody at that time saw any sense in continuing to tell that story.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to talk about, I think one of the most impressive sequences was at the very end. It was during the Burr Hamilton duel, and just like basically after Burr takes his shot, and there's like that freeze frame, like, and then Hamilton has like his revelation, his monologue. I was like blown away by that, like, where he steps out and kind of talks about the different possibilities of what he could do. And I just thought that, I mean, that's something that you would see in like a movie, that kind of like split second that gets elongated. And I mean, to see that on stage, I thought that was really well executed, very well.
Yeah. And, you know, one thing I noticed while watching Blind Spotting, which was co-written by Daveed Diggs, is that when he does the final monologue in the house in Blind Spotting, all of it really kind of calls back to stuff that you saw earlier. Everything that he says calls back to things that you saw earlier. And I'm sure that was the way that he did that was largely inspired by how Lin-Manuel Miranda wrote Hamilton. And when you're talking or when you hear the monologue where, he says, I've imagined death so much, it feels more like a memory. He says that multiple times throughout. And then when it actually happens, it makes it all the more powerful because it's a callback to it.
Yeah, I mean, I agreed. I noticed that as well. Just the repetition of that line specifically. I want to watch it again already. I mean, it's crazy. I'm definitely listening to the music I have since I watched it last night, but I'm ready to like watch it again because it was so good, and I think it's so like relevant to everything that's going on in America right now too.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the really cool things about Hamilton is that when this came out on Disney Plus, they were doing kind of like a live streaming tweets fest of while watching Hamilton and learning some different things. And I learned that Sasha Hollinger, who is the woman who plays basically the bullet, that delivers the bullet from Aaron Burr to Hamilton in the final duel, she kind of serves as an angel of death throughout.
Right, I did notice that she was the bullet multiple times. And
she also shook John Lawrence's hand before he passed away throughout. So it's and she, like kind of her journey and watching that, knowing all that different stuff, because I had to retroactively go back and remember, like you did, that she was the bullet multiple times and that she did shake his hand and that she kind of served as the angel of death throughout. Makes it, it's the little things like that make things, it separates them from being good and being great.
She was the MAGA hat from Da 5 Bloods.
Yeah. That's exactly what she was.
Exactly. I also think just at the very end, I know there's a lot of like really good nuggets, like quotes that you can take out from this, but the one that stuck with me at the very end, and I feel like it's probably, I haven't researched it, but I would be willing to bet it's probably one of the most famous from the show. The legacy, what is a legacy? It's planting seeds in a garden you never get to see. Like that's something that is extremely accurate, I feel like, for any kind of person fighting for social justice, for equality, for any sort of reason. And I think that's something that's like obviously relevant to today.
Yeah, I mean, just the execution of this experience, whether it be the songwriting, whether it be the actual writing of the story, whether it be the performances, just kind of create the ability to make this so successful and so enjoyable. And even watching the differences in terms of how the characters or how the actors approach their characters, with Leslie Odom Jr. playing Aaron Burr, his journey is phenomenal, because he starts off as the one that knows more, the one that is teaching Hamilton, and then it kind of builds as their relationship fractures. And then, watching something like Wait For It or Dear Theodosia to understand his motivations. And of course, his singular performance with The Room Where It Happened, where he goes like full Robin Williams from Aladdin is just, just phenomenal.
Do you have, as a more seasoned listener, someone, a particular either actor, character, or song that stands out as your favorite?
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, Satisfied and Nonstop were my two favorites for a while. Burn was a big one for me as well. But now watching it, coming away as an instant reaction, The Room Where It Happened was my favorite performance, followed by Satisfied in Yorktown, and then Nonstop. And then, it's really kind of a free-for-all because they're all so excellent. But, and that's why I think watching it makes a difference, because The Room Where It Happened was just something that I would listen to just to sort of hear Leslie Odom Jr., but not necessarily pay any attention to it. But to watch him kind of bring it to the fullest extent on stage made me enjoy it so much more. And like I said before, I used to skip all of Jonathan Groff stuff. And now I absolutely will not, because he really stole the show, because, you have major players like Lin-Manuel Miranda, like Aaron Burr, Philippa Sue, Renee Elise Goldsberry, Daveed Diggs, people that are in the production for the majority of it. And then you have Jonathan Groff, who's only in it a few times for a few different songs, completely, just brings it to his fullest extent and completely dominates the show.
When I Know Him, when he has the whole reaction to John Adams being president,
Yeah.
like that's incredible. The way he's like so giddy and cheering and stuff. It just like, it's so different than anything else like within the show. Like his character being so like kind of like almost as like a surrogate for the audience, like breaking the fourth wall, kind of directly addressing the audience, whether it's with that or at the very like welcoming them to the auditorium, to the theater. Just I really loved his part as well. But I mean, I would say that for entertainment purposes, I think there are better songs, but the cabinet battles were the most entertaining to me. Like I just loved the back and forth there, and I thought it was hilarious the way that they like spoke, the blend of like dialect from that era to like modern rap battle, like what you would hear in like disses in a modern rap battle, like insulting what the clothes that he wears and stuff. Like I thought that those were awesome. Trying to like keep up as quick as they were going and really listen to everything. That's another thing. I did not know going in that this was a show where everything was sung. Like I've seen, I mean, obviously that's not the case with all musicals. Like another example, Les Mis does that, where every single part of it is, there's no dialogue. It's all told through song. So I didn't realize that going in, but I mean, I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah. I mean, and one of the great things about Hamilton is that every song is so good that, anyone can be your favorite on any given day.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I'm sure I'll come to realize that as I listen in the days and weeks to come. But do you have, before we move on, we have one final question to pose, but any final thoughts on Hamilton?
No, but if you have Disney Plus, I think both of us would really recommend it. It is quite enjoyable. Do not be scared of the runtime because it really flies by. And it's one of those things that only comes along, every few, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So if you have time, if you have opportunity, I would definitely suggest checking it out.
I 100% endorse that statement. I will say, as Jake and I are a movie podcast, this will not be appearing. We're treating this as an event because basically it's a filmed version of a play, of a musical. So we can't really like, if we were to rate or review or critique something, it would be the musical itself, not like a movie or the production of it on film. So this will not be appearing on any like top 20, top 25, whatever lists we put out at the end of the year when it comes to movies. Although if we were, it would likely be right up there at or near the top. So fully endorse what Jake said. Go check it out. You will not regret it. But the final question before we close things out, I addressed this with Jake earlier because for both of us, not being like diehard musical fans, I didn't think we could put together a full top 5 ranking. But Jake, what other shows that you're familiar with or that you want to be familiar with would you like to see done in a manner like this? Put an original Broadway production onto film for people to have access to.
So I've listened to Wicked a lot, but I've never seen it, and I would love.
So good.
I would love to. If they could do Wicked like they did this, I think that would just be phenomenal because I would love to see that.
I'm with you there. That's one of mine as well. I did see it. I saw it when I visited Rebecca when she was studying abroad in London. So we saw it at the West End, but it's so good. That's one that I had listened to the music beforehand just because of how incredible it was. I think that could be a similar level of like eventness surrounding it, a release like that. I know they are making a Wicked movie in the years to come, like an actual like movie version of the story. But yeah, I think that's one of the same kind of scale that could really do numbers like this. I would also say the other favorite musical that I have seen is Waitress, which is written by, it's like based on a movie, but the music is written by Sarah Bareilles. So I saw that on Broadway. That's the only one I've seen on Broadway, but it's incredible. Another I would recommend. It's not really like show tunes type music. It's more of like a Sarah Bareilles like ballad type, but that would be very good. Not as like grand scale as anything like this though, but just because I love that so much. I think I've listened to one song, maybe two, from the Book of Mormon, and I saw that Josh Gad.
I've seen Book of Mormon.
That's what made Josh Gad famous, and I saw he posted on Twitter that there is a filmed version similar to this of that hasn't been released. They don't know what the deal is with it, but kind of hinting at that could be a possibility of something to come, and I would definitely check that out. I'm trying to think.
Yeah, Book of Mormon is excellent. I would love to see a Broadway version of The Lion King as well.
Yeah, I mean, those are, like, I was thinking about that, like, all of the Disney, like, there's Lion King, there's Aladdin, like, those ones, very, I mean, it's still exciting, even though we all have seen the movies, we know the music, we know the story, like, I think that just being able to see that on a different medium would be very exciting as well.
For sure.
I'm trying to think what else. I've seen Les Mis. I saw it when my brother was in it in high school, and then I've seen the movie, and then I saw it when it came to Charlotte. So I've had enough Les Mis, I think.
Les Mis has been done so many different times that it would just...
Maybe some Cats. Get after the movie last year, get Cats, the Broadway version, out there.
Yeah, get the revival out.
I'm trying to... As far as, like, my familiarity goes, I'm sure there are more diehard theater fans out there that could have a lengthy list, but I mean, those are the pretty basic ones from my end that I would say.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's it. That's Hamilton. That's Broadway talk. We will return to our regularly scheduled movie programming next week, likely with one, if not both, of the Old Guard and Palm Springs. But until then, be sure to follow us on social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube at Inside Film Room. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review 5 stars wherever you get your podcasts. And Jake and I will talk to you next time.
See you.